Yep,
Now.
you make sure Okay, welcome everybody to the third installment of the planning webinar series. This is the third version of it, what we call our final version of our resource support webinars. Just for those that are tuning in now or tuning in at a later date, we have 6 directed webinars, 1 hour-long webinars for each subject. We have 3 that are dedicated to what we call our resource support webinars, which are dedicated to the actual lessons, the learning materials. What we effectively do is take you through a series of questions, your actual learning activities. Alyssa and I will actually go through the questions and some of the recommended answers, or just really just as a chance to unpack the material. The other 3 for each subject are what we call our assessment support workshops, where we'll actually take you through each of the assessments that you're required to submit for each subject. Next week, we'll be doing our first round of assessment support workshops for both planning and another subject called project planning, if you're working on that subject as well. So if you're interested to see, or if you haven't actually submitted your assessment ones for both of those subjects, we do strongly recommend that you are in attendance next week for those ones. Feel free to have a look online to catch any ones that you have missed as well. You'll see when you log on to your course homepage, there'll be links to future webinars as well as embedded videos of previous editions. So without further ado, we should jump straight into this week's discussion points, and the topics of discussion tonight in this installment are learning, the learning activity on learning, and the last one which we're going to be talking about today is 360-degree feedback.
Yay! And then I think that's all the learning activities covered. How exciting. And as you mentioned, next week we'll be kicking off into the assessments, which is exciting.
Which is great. I'm sure you guys will have quite a few questions for us at that point, which is fantastic. So really the majority of the resource support sessions have been Alyssa and I doing a lot of talking, where we really unpack all of the material, try and give you some explanations and try and bring the actual theory to life a little bit for you. The assessment workshops will give you a bit of an explanation of what we need, but really it's up to you guys to ask some questions of us relating specifically to that. So there'll be a little bit less talking, I would have thought, next week, maybe about half an hour worth of 20-30 minutes worth of a presentation from Alyssa and I, and then the rest is up to you, you guys. So tune in, be a part of that one, because you'll get a chance to hear your fellow students ask some questions, and obviously it's an opportunity for yourself too to ask questions about the assessments. Shall we jump straight into the first learning activity?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start off with learning then, shall we?
Let's do learning. I think it's a good way to start.
I think it is a good way to start. So I'm just loading up the screen.
Sounds good. Now everybody, everybody who's watching either on delayed version telecast or live in the room right now, we are actually all visualizing Alyssa's screen. So this is actually Alyssa's live screen feed as we are. So there you go. That could not have been written yesterday, could it? I mean,
what was that?
It demonstrates the live aspect of these webinars, because that certainly could not have been written yesterday.
No, that's right. Okay. All right. So there's actually there's 3 questions for the learning activity. Shall we get started on these 3 questions, because we do enjoy talking about these 3 questions, Adam?
We do. We most certainly do. So let's jump straight into it. Did you want to get a kickstart on the first one, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now the very first question is, what is your learning style and why do you prefer this style? Now, I guess just the heads up, everybody, if you are referring to the resource material do provide some examples of learning styles. However, what Adam and I kind of want to do is we want to kind of take it back to the basics for you, and we want to kind of go back to the basics of what an actual learning style is, so that you can understand, so that the material doesn't seem as daunting, because it can be a little bit confusing at the moment. Now, generally speaking, when we talk about learning styles, humans or we have three ways of learning. So we have a visual style of learning, okay? We have an auditory, and here's where everybody gets to see how great a speller I am. We can be visual learners, we can be auditory learners, and we can be kinesthetic.
Can I spell it? Can I spell it?
Yeah, go for it. How?
Okay. K-I-N-A-E.
Yeah.
That's the tricky bit. S T-H-E-T-I-C. Kinesthetic.
Kinesthetic. Yes. So you can
I
be
think that's right.
a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner. So I guess to give you a bit of an idea of what each of these are, a kinesthetic learner is somebody that learns by kind of doing tasks or a really hands-on approach. So say, for example, I spent a lot of my early career working in hospitality, and I was a very big kinesthetic learner. So instead of you sitting me down and telling me how to make a coffee or showing me how to make a coffee, I needed to go out there and I needed to actually make the coffee myself. So being in hospitality, I became a kinesthetic learner. So it's very hands-on. I needed to get my hands dirty. I needed to practice the task. I needed to feel what the task was like to perform. So essentially that is what a kinesthetic learner is. Adam, do you have anything to add to kinesthetic learning?
Yeah, well, a lot. Actually, I'm a kinesthetic learner myself. I'd just like to probably clear something up just before we sort of progress a little bit deeper into these particular styles. As Alyssa mentioned, what we're looking at tonight is just the basic learning styles. What we have in the learning material is a little bit more developed, and we just feel that by having this sort of basis of understanding of learning styles, it just might assist in making a bit more sense of what's in the actual learning material. The thing to note here with these learning styles are the main word that I like to use is the word preference. It's really a preference. Now, each individual typically has a preference for learning in a particular style, and that's what these styles are. It's really just a preference. So this is really about understanding yourself and understanding how you operate as an individual, but being able to assist yourself through the process of learning by knowing what your preferences are. Now, before we continue, some people have preferences that are multiple preferences. Somebody can be auditory and kinesthetic combinations, can have combinations of them. Typically, you'll have a dominant style, though. So we will refer to this just as from that sort of basis that typically you have a dominant style, and we'll be referring to each of these styles as if that is your, I guess, dominant style. Leading up to, or going back to talking about kinesthetic, Alyssa, yeah, it is my style. Funnily enough, it is the most common of the three basic learning styles, kinesthetic. And as you said, it's really about hands-on, the touching, the feeling, the holding, the doing, practical stuff. The other component as a kinesthetic learner is that kinesthetic learners generally connect. They'll say things like, how does that feel, or how do I feel about something? So it's not only because there'll be plenty of situations where you're learning where you don't have the opportunity to make something a hands-on example, and the way that kinesthetic learners are encouraged to sort of enhance their learning experience is really to try and understand how, or connect on an emotional level to a certain degree, but how does that feel, trying to be in that feel space. And so what actually Alyssa and I do, you'll notice this through, if you've come to previous webinars, if we're talking about a subject like project planning or whatever the subject might be, Alyssa and I try and give you an anecdote or a story, or try and make it like a real-life example, because by giving it a real-life feeling and flavour, we're appealing to people that are kinesthetic learners because they are able to connect well with real-life examples and real-life feelings. So it's not even just the physical component of touching and doing and holding and that side, but it's the other side, the feeling, that connecting to something in the real-world space. So yeah, that's my little tidbit on kinesthetic learners. Now, you yourself are an auditory learner, is that right, Alyssa?
Yeah, so I think well, from my interpretation of myself and I think I started off as a kinesthetic learner, but for some strange reason I think I've developed into a bit of an auditory learner. So I really enjoy the process of listening to what people have to say. I really learn, like I've probably in the last maybe 5 or 6 years, that's how I learn best. I sit, I listen. I used to be very, very hands-on, but now I love hearing stories. I love listening to people's ideas. I love listening to a person talk. I never ever take notes in any training session that I've ever been in, purely because it distracts me from the learning process of being of just like listening. So it's a bit of an evolution for me. I think I still think I'm a kinesthetic learner, but I think I've kind of moved into a bit of an auditory style of late.
So that just goes to show that we do all engage in all different styles, but we generally have a dominant preference for one over the other. But that's not to say that you can't have two that are almost as dominant as each other. It's very, very common that that's the case. I wasn't aware that you develop one over the other as time progresses. It's a really interesting component to this conversation is what's the time component and can that change?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a whole conversation for another time, but it's a very, very interesting.
Yeah, it could be the evolution of the learning style. I mean, it's a very interesting. It's very interesting. I mean, I guess, and also talking on the other end of the spectrum, there are those people that are very visual and they learn by watching. They learn by looking at pictures. They learn by looking at diagrams, and so they're very visual in terms of like grasping an understanding of material. So so that's obviously another component, and I'm sure Adam will also take you through this, but if you're really unsure about what kind of learning style you are or what your preference is, I think we've got a little bit of a back test, don't we? So whether or not you're visual, you're auditory, or you're kinesthetic learner. So a series of questions to determine your actual preference. Is that correct?
I think there's some definitions in our supplementary material list for this particular subject on the VAK, or the Voice Visual Auditory Kinesthetic. Do have a look. Just do a Google search on a learning style test. If you do a Google search, there's hundreds of them out there, or there's a few of them out there.
Yeah.
Have a look. I don't know that we can post everything up on our site, so I think it's okay for us to recommend our students to go off and have a look.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely go out there and investigate to determine what style your particular style is, because while you're going through the journey of learning, if you can make things a bit easier for yourself, then it's really important. So let's try and give a bit of an example here for, I guess, how to encourage visual learners, how to encourage auditory learners, and so on and so forth, because we don't always get to choose how we learn in a particular situation. We might be standing somewhere and somebody might be yelling out instructions at us. We might be on the side of a road somewhere trying to work out where the corner of XYZ and ABC Street is, and we have to ask somebody for directions. They're going to explain it to us, using their voice, using sounds, and we might be a visual learner, and all of a sudden we have to adapt this audio and try and make it fit into our style, possibly.
Yeah.
So I think I've just confused things a little bit more.
Absolutely, and
by bringing up this example.
Well, you'll notice, I guess, if you've ever been in a classroom style of training, you'll probably notice that you'll have the trainer who will speak. The trainer will always have some kind of visual component, so it might be a PowerPoint, it might be a handout, it might be a series of pictures or diagrams, and quite often they will also cater for the kinesthetic learner, so there will be a demonstration or a role play of some kind as well. So what it does is that's actually designed to ensure that you cater for all the different learning styles that are the basic 3 learning styles in the room. So you capture all your audience and you can engage your audience. And it's really interesting. I think I was telling you before I went into one training session and I'd sat down. I wasn't the trainer, but I was a participant. And the trainer had Play-Doh in front of every chair. So, as you sat down, you had Play-Doh and you had pipe cleaners, those pipe cleaner things. And what you could tell who the kinesthetic learners were, because as soon as they got in the room, they picked up that Play-Doh, they started playing with it. Yeah. As soon as that happened, it stimulates the learning process. Those kinesthetic learners can still take it in because they're using their learning style to be able to learn. It's really interesting. Yeah.
So you've just given us a good example of what you can do if you're a kinesthetic learner to help yourself, and this is really where we're getting at, following on from what I was sort of saying earlier, if you understand what your particular style is, you can help yourself.
Yep.
So when somebody's yelling instructions at you and you're a visual learner, what you want to do and what we'd encourage visual learners to do is to start to visualize things, get things in your mind, write things down, draw things out. Visual learners work really well with lists and written directions. They work really well with maps, those sorts of things. They work great with flowcharts, diagrams, those sorts of things. So if you know that you're a visual learner, help yourself a little bit, try and give yourself a bit of an extra help there. Likewise, if you're an auditory learner and you've been handed this map to try and find the treasure, talk things out. Start talking the instructions through in your mind so you can hear that voice in your mind. Talk things out to other people. Those sorts of things. Talking it out is the best way for an auditory person to go about learning. So listen to that voice inside your head and talk it through with other people. That's the best suggestion I've got there.
Yep, yeah.
And the kinesthetic learners, as you've sort of pointed out there, Alyssa, that they're best by touching and feeling things, and not all situations are available for us to touch and hold and feel and so on and so forth. So where possible, if you're a kinesthetic learner, try and put something into a real life situation. So if you're reading some sort of theory, try and make sense of it. Try and go, okay, this is a bit of theory. What's an example of this? Then you'll understand exactly what you're dealing with. So just understand yourself a little bit better and then try and help yourself by, I guess working with your style a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Definitely go on have a look online for those tests, though, because they're really easy tests. I'll give you an example of a question you'll find on a test like this. Be something like, when you operate a new piece of machinery, I generally A, read the instructions first, B, listen to an explanation from somebody who's used the machine before, or C, just go right ahead and use the machine. I'll figure it out as I go. So if you said A, you're probably leaning to be a visual learner there. B, that's probably somebody who is of an auditory preference. And then you've got the kinesthetic learner, somebody who just wants to jump in and start using the machine. These tests will generally give you maybe 15, 20 questions, something like this, and then it just becomes a majority, because different things you'll tap into different areas. So some things you will use a list on, some things you will ask for help on, some things you're better off just jumping in there and doing it. And this is really just, and that's why we said earlier, preference. It's really just a learning preference. As you go through your learning guides, you'll see there's lots of learning models, diagrams, lots of different ideas out there. All of these things are there to help us with our learning and help us to make sense of different theories. But question what you're looking at. I mean, that's part of this sort of a level of education, is that you need to start to question what you're looking at. Look outside the square a little bit. There's not one golden rule for everything in life, and that's really, I guess, a matter of just sort of working through that. But all of these things, including this learning styles, do provide some really good insight in how we operate and how we work, and there's some great merit in all of this sort of stuff, so definitely check it out. Does anybody want to add anything to in the chat box? Actually, Stephen had a comment earlier, but does anybody want to add anything to this conversation before we move to the next question? Okay. Shall we go to the next question?
Let us go forth. Let us go forth and conquer.
So yeah, it's a good example of kinesthetic memory, is what Stephen's actually written in the chat box, and it's basically memory in terms of ideal representation of movement and sensations, and that's what we're talking about when we're talking about kinesthetic learning. It is all about movements and sensations, and if you can't have that movement, then you need the sensation of feeling in that space. So yeah, that's a nice little comment there too. Networking, I believe there's somebody who really enjoys talking about this particular subject.
I love a good chat. I love a good chat. Okay, so question 2 and question 3 really do talk about the importance of networking. So question 2 says, what are some networking ways that have worked best for you in the past? And then question 3 goes on to ask what the benefits of networking for you and the business are. So look, I'm a bit of a fan of networking. I don't have a sales background or anything like that, but my concept of networking is just, as I mentioned to Adam yesterday, is like, don't ever burn your bridges, because you never know who you're talking to, you never know who you're having a conversation with, you never know who you've worked with before that might affect you at another stage in the future. And, you know, traditionally the concept of networking was that, you know, you go to these networking functions, you drink some wine, you schmooze people to try
Drink a lot of wine.
yeah, to drink a lot of wine, to schmooze people, to get them to give you something or to make a contact for business. But, you know, I think networking is really just about being polite, being respectful with pretty much everybody you meet. Because, as I said before, you never know who you're talking to, and you never ever know what opportunity you might have with them in the future, or what opportunity they might have for you in the future. And I think, Adam,
it's a good conversation, burning bridges. Have you got any example of a situation where you burnt a bridge and it came back to bite you on the bum, or where you anything like that at all?
Yeah.
Or somebody that you discovered that you had no idea, and that person was somebody very influential, and you only just realised later date they were a very influential person?
Yeah, well, I was as I was mentioning yesterday. Obviously, Adam and I, we work in what's called registered training organisation land, and I train with a group every morning. So, like physical train in the park from 6 a.m. till 7 a.m. And there's pretty much 8 to 10 of us, and I have known this guy Ray for probably 5 years, and I see him 4 mornings a week, and we train and we chat pretty much for an hour each, like for the last 5 years. And it was only probably about 18 months ago when we were having a conversation, and he said to me that his best mate was was the CEO for one of Australia's biggest registered training organisations, and he said, if you're looking for work, I am more than happy to recommend a direct interview with my mate. And you know, I had no idea that his mate was the CEO of this big registered training organisation. I really didn't. And it was just that I'd known him for 5 years, and we'd have conversations, and he was more than willing to recommend me for a job opportunity. So you never know who you're standing next to. You never know who you're having a coffee with. You just never know. So always be polite, be respectful, engage, be honest, be genuine with who you are, because you just never ever know. And Adam, you had a really great story about your brother-in-law yesterday, I think it was.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. But look, yeah, you're 100% spot on with what you're saying. Look, in my feel, my experience, that the people that are really movers and shakers in life, they're quite often the most down-to-earth, lovely people you will ever meet. That they may wear cheap tracky pants, or they'll wear $20 pair of runners and go down the street in a station wagon, and they are worth a mint. Some people like to show and tell and do all that sort of stuff. Not everybody. In fact, that's what I just want to say. So, as just following up from what you're saying, it's really interesting, because that has actually happened to me plenty of times, where I had no idea that's what you were doing. So always be polite to people, always be nice to people, because you never know who you're speaking to. You never know where that opportunity is going to come from. But in terms of networking, I would really just like to share what I feel is the most powerful way of networking, and that's engaging in what I call your personal networks. We all know many people. What we're talking about in our personal networks are people that we know. And that's it, because the power of working with your personal networks is just tremendous. Organisations want to hire people that they can trust and that they know. I mean, if you think about it, and you're an organisation and it's your company and you're looking to hire people, and you're going to be sharing, your processes with that person. You're going to be sharing your product details. You're going to be sharing your customer base information. You're sharing a lot of stuff. You want to know that you can trust that person, that they can, come on and work with your team and not disrupt things and not put at risk your business or anything like that. So always engage with your personal networks, and by doing so, you'll see how powerful it is. I'll give you that example that you were talking about. My brother-in-law worked for an RTO. You were talking about RTOs, registered training organisations. I was trying to get into the world of training a couple of years ago, and I went up to him and I said, look, do you know anybody that I can speak to? I'm really keen to find some work. Now, I know you're probably thinking, okay, well, it's my brother-in-law, then how easy is that? That's an instant in. But what you need to know is I had a very strained relationship with him prior to that. In fact, interestingly enough, this exact scenario actually brought us very, very close together because he was able to feel good about himself that he was able to do something for me. And that's a really interesting dynamic here. I mean, generally speaking, we don't like to ask for help. As humans, we want to try and take care of it all ourselves, no dramas. The interesting thing is when you ask somebody for their assistance and you're genuine about it and you're showing a little bit of vulnerability, look, I'm in a bit of a pickle, I need a bit of help here, I was wondering if you can give me a bit of a hand or point me in the right direction, or do you know anybody that can help? People genuinely want to help others. Now, unless a few came up to me and asked me for advice, whatever it might be, the funny thing is you're going to make me feel really good about myself because you're coming to me for advice, and it's just human psychology. So when you're feeling that you don't want to ask somebody for help or you're feeling like you can't engage in some of those personal networks, I want you just to imagine or just to consider the dynamic that exists for the other person that you are asking for help from. You're actually giving them a big compliment at that moment. You're making them feel pretty special. So as awkward as you may feel asking for help, just consider what it does for the other person. As it turns out, my brother-in-law ended up passing my resume on to somebody at his organisation. I went down and had a meeting. Turns out that I wasn't right for the job, or I wasn't right for the job at that time, and they helped me identify a big training gap in where my skills were compared to where I wanted to be or needed to be for my particular chosen profession. I went about going off to fix those skills, and later on, history, there it is. Things ended up working itself out. But nevertheless, what happened through that particular interview was that they said, look, we actually really like you a lot. We think you're a lovely guy. We love the history you've got. You just don't have enough experience in X, Y, and Z. And they laid it out for me. And I basically said, look, if I go about getting this experience, would you consider, employing me in 6 months' time or something like that? And they said, absolutely. Guess what? Exactly what happened. So, but all of the elements that they needed to satisfy, like, do we trust this person? Is he reputable? Can we put him in front of a bunch of our students that and our reputations online? All of those things they felt comfortable because it was recommended by somebody that worked there that they trust. Now you wouldn't recommend anybody if you work somewhere, you wouldn't recommend anybody there unless you trust them. And companies do that. Aside from that, it saves them a bucket load of cash as well from filing for application forms. That's just I guess another benefit. But the power of personal networks is huge. So I guess really just in terms of talking about networking, for me it's the most powerful. In the age of social media, nothing will ever come close to that face-to-face, that personal touch, that personal recommendation. You can't beat it.
And I just wanted to add as well, Stephen put something very interesting that's kind of triggered my interest there. And he's mentioned, what about other people burning your bridges? Well,
look, that's going to happen in life. Depending on how badly they burn a bridge, and that's an interesting dynamic, because if somebody does something that I would consider has burnt my bridge, but later on comes back to attempt to repair it.
Correct.
It depends on the situation, really. It really does depend on the situation. However, it's really not recommended. I mean, you just wouldn't do it.
No, absolutely not. And if people are burning your bridges, then later on in life, they might end up in a situation where they need you, but they've burnt your bridge, so therefore you don't support them. So they essentially haven't. Does that make sense? Hopefully, it's an interesting thought. You can't control what other people say, but you can always remain genuine, and you can always remain honest and open with who you are, and hopefully with your networking skills and your own, interpersonal skills, people will know who you are truthfully, and those people that burn your bridges, who create rumours, they will be the people that will probably just fall to the pathway, I think. That's my thought process on that.
The other thing I'll say is that the bridge is a shared bridge. It's one bridge that's connecting two bits of land, so it is only one bridge. So whether it's burning that bridge or this bridge, it is the bridge that's burned, and once it's burned, it's really hard to bring it back. What I would say, just in reference to burning bridges, if ever you leave an employment, we all do from time to time, and that's okay, and it's quite emotional quite often when you leave an employment. That's normal. Don't walk out the door swinging, swinging your lasso and going yeehaw and stick it to the man and stick it to the boss on the way out. Well, might feel good to think about it. It might feel good to even just, have those thoughts late at night maybe, but it's never good to do it. It is never, ever, 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 ever good to do that. And I'll give you a reason why. That person is likely going to be your next reference for your next job. Because the next job they'll always want to hear a reference from somebody that might have something to do with, the field of work that you're trying to get into, but they'll always want to talk to your most recent boss as well. They want to. They do. If you burn that bridge, you've lost that reference. It's really bad. But worse than that, I've seen this happen too, worse than that, they go, oh, you worked at down in Canterbury here at that call centre down there. Oh, okay. Yeah. I actually know the guy really well. I might even just pick up the phone and go, uh-oh.
Yep.
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 Good night.
Yeah.
Finished.
And that is,
it's just good.
That is the reason why you try not to use the word burn bridges, because if you're in an industry, the industries themselves are all linked. Like, people are linked. People know people that know people that know people. So you can go, oh yeah, I totally worked with that. Yeah. So this is why you have to be really careful about all of that type of thing. Yeah, definitely.
It's really true. You're on a life journey. Everybody else is on a journey. People will come and go from different industries. You might think you'll never see that person again. Mistake. You may see them again.
Exactly right.
And it's a small world. I mean, there's an expression for a reason. It really is a small world out there. And the funny thing is, business is even smaller. Industry is even smaller. They are very insular. So, and people like to gossip. Let's be honest. So, don't give people some fodder to work with. I like to call it fodder. Really have a better class. Walk out the door with your head held high. Go and buy a little teddy bear and kick it out the back door or whatever you need to do to get the aggression out. But don't, just leave with a bit of class, leave with your dignity, leave knowing that you've done the right thing, and that's really my suggestion.
Yep.
In terms of networking, we should probably talk, I guess, a little bit about social media.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think a great tool, if anybody isn't already a part of it or kind of hasn't got an account with it, but LinkedIn is also a great, that's taking networking just to a different level and away from the traditional concept of what networking really is. I mean, things like LinkedIn, these are opportunities for you to develop your networks. You obviously put all your employment history on there, and then you can connect with people that are from the industry. You can connect with groups that always kind of connect with groups that have different ideas and tell you about different emerging trends within your industry as well. They give you job opportunities. A lot of people are recruiting through LinkedIn now because it is really about who you know and who you're connected to. So LinkedIn, it's a bit kind of bordering on social media, but I think it should kind of be differentiated against. But I know
you don't like my explanation here, but for people who have no idea what we're talking about, this is Facebook for professionals. But, it's a very crude explanation of it because it's nothing like Facebook. There's no pictures of cute little cats on there for starters. It's the professional version thereof, if you like.
Yeah, and that's probably, I maintain a lot of my networks by just checking in and seeing what people are doing, and if there's anything happening and there's any trends or there's any changes in the industry, that is always posted on LinkedIn, and it's automatic. It's there. You can touch base. You can see what's happening. It gives you great knowledge. It gives you it just develops your skills and your knowledge essentially. Yeah.
Look, you guys out there that are listening in, our students, you are Diploma of Management students, really we're trying to develop you guys as the next wave of leaders, as team leaders, as leaders in your organisation, whatever your field is. You absolutely have to get yourself on this LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It is, if you think it doesn't have any penetration, if you think it's just a nice conversation, 23.8% of the Australian population currently are on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
What happens now is in a professional circumstance is that, recruiters will look at your LinkedIn profile. If you don't have one, that now becomes a disadvantage, not an advantage. It used to be an advantage, now it's just a disadvantage if you don't have it. So if you don't have it, they'll look at it and go, why don't you have a profile? So have you got something to hide? Are you not wanting to be public because you go around burning bridges, or what's the story? So you really need to get yourself on there. And yeah, it's become that important, I would have thought, especially in recruitment.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously that is different ways that you can network. There's a lot of different ways that you can network. And it's just LinkedIn's quite easy, it's quite convenient, it's quite there, and everybody uses their smartphone, or everybody has their smartphone, so it's always very accessible. And I guess that probably leads on to question 3, Adam, which is, what are the benefits of networking for you in the business? And I think during the conversation that we've had, hopefully we've identified some of the benefits of networking for you. I guess the other perspective of that question is to really focus on, like we've talked about personal networking, but also networking from a business perspective. I mean, if you're going out there and you're putting your business out there and you're networking as a business and you're showcasing your business, I mean, what does that do for your reputation? What does that do for your your market stability, or what does that do for your business if you are constantly networking and putting yourself out there?
All publicity is good publicity. What's that expression? All publicity is good publicity, and that's true.
All publicity is good publicity. That's right.
And that's sort of what you're talking about. You're talking about brand awareness or increasing the brand. That sort of awareness of the brand, brand awareness, and that's one of the biggest benefits for networking.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does a small business that has 2 staff grow from a seed? Nothing. They've got a name. Nobody knows their name. Nobody knows their products. They need to get their name out there, and then all of a sudden, you get brand awareness, and that's how consumers purchase things. It's a whole other conversation talking about consumer purchasing behaviour. But one of the stages in consumer purchasing behaviour is identifying the options available to you. And usually, what comes to play here is brand awareness. So we usually, when we're making a decision whether we're going on a holiday, whether we're going to buy a chocolate bar, whatever we're doing for dinner, whatever our purchase decision is, we usually weigh up brands that are known to us. And so therefore brand awareness becomes a huge benefit to businesses. The more awareness and recognition you get with that brand, then you become part of the consumer's decision-making process is what I'm trying to. The consumers, that's not even a word. That's
I don't know.
Some other benefits just to wrap up. Yeah, I was just going to say a couple more benefits here. It's free advice from other businesses. Good businesses, small businesses do it well, where they network with each other. Becomes like a real industry. I've seen it in small business as well. So you can get advice from networking. Benchmarking is another term I like to throw out here. Benchmarking is the process when businesses benchmark against others, and what that means is they look at how other businesses, maybe their competitors, are doing whatever that particular process is, or they compare themselves against another, and that's called benchmarking. And that's a benefit of networking. You can start to benchmark yourself. Benefits might include increased motivation to perform, new opportunities, referrals, connections, all the obvious sort of stuff. But anything that you put in there that looks like a clear benefit will be an acceptable answer.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. Shall we
go on to the next series?
Yeah. Move on to the next series, shall we?
Beautiful. Does anybody have any questions? Want to add anything to the discussion before we roll into the next series of questions? Okay.
I'm just opening it up now.
We've got some students experiencing some audio problems. I'm hearing you nice and clearly at the moment, Alyssa. If anybody else listening in live has got any audio issues, just let us know. Thanks.
Yeah, I can hear you quite clearly as well, Adam. So.
Beautiful. I'm actually, it's so much better running these in the evening because the office is quite quiet, and there's a lot less background noise coming through the channel, which is good. Let's talk about the first question. Jump straight into it.
Yep, absolutely. So obviously, as the title of the actual learning activity, 360-degree feedback. So these 6 questions here are all revolving around feedback. So I think the first 3 are quite generalised in terms of feedback, and then the last 3 really specifically focus in on 360 feedback. So that very first question is, what is the frequency of feedback you currently receive, and how can you improve the feedback you get and use it to improve yourself? Okay.
Cool.
Again, I mean, I think this is quite a personalised question. Currently ask yourself, how often do you receive feedback? Now, if you're obviously not currently employed, you can also maybe take into context the feedback that you receive when you do your learning activities or you do your assessments from Adam and I. That could also be considered a way to answer this question. I'd be quite happy with that. So I guess it's just asking, how often do you currently receive feedback, and how can you improve the feedback you get and use it to improve yourself? So when you receive that feedback, is there any questions that you might be able to ask to further gain more feedback so that you understand clearly what it is that you have to focus on to be able to improve yourself?
Yeah, and you've sort of given the answer that I would be looking for there. Really, this question is two parts. What's the frequency? So how often are you getting feedback from others about your performance? That's what we want to know. And then with that feedback, how can you make it better? How can you improve? We should really put an extra word in this question, which is the quality of the feedback that you get. And I think you kind of answered it there. Ask some questions. I feel like that's the best way. Imagine, Alyssa, you asked me after this session, Adam, how do you think the webinar went? How do you think I performed in today's webinar? And I just said, it wasn't very good. Do you think, would you call that quality feedback, or would you go, how can I work with this to improve myself? I want to improve. I'm asking this question because I'm wanting to improve.
Yeah.
And the way you would probably do it is go, look, anything specific about the performance that you did? Maybe you'd ask me, was it my tone of voice? Was it the answers I was giving? Would I take too long in answering questions? By getting specific and asking me more questions, you're likely to get more quality or more specific feedback. Giving or receiving feedback, be specific. Always be specific.
Absolutely.
It's actually a key skill in being assertive. Assertion skills require people to be very specific. If you're not specific, it's very, very hard to get people to change their behaviour in life in general. Good luck. Go home and try and tell somebody you love that to change, to get better to generally get better at cooking or something. Good luck with that one.
Yeah.
Be more specific. If you say, I really love what you did with that particular spice, maybe the next time I'd love it if you throw in a bit of oregano or something. I think that might, be specific about the feedback you're looking for, and guess what? You'll get the results that you want. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, dear.
What's all that beeping going on in the background?
I don't know. Is maybe somebody's in and offline.
Yeah, not sure. Oh, there it is again.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
And again. So good. Okay, so if you don't meet a desired competency standard, what would you do to improve your skill knowledge? I might just get you to clear up the word competency for those that are listening in. I've had a few students that probably had a bit of difficulty understanding that term.
Okay.
And then we can explain this question.
No drama. So if you don't meet a desired competency standard, what could you do to improve your skills or knowledge? So I guess when we talk about the word competency standard, what we're talking about is we're talking about the minimum level required to be able to perform a certain task, or the minimum requirements you need to be able to perform a certain task. Okay. So for example, if I use I'll use the example of a food and beverage attendant. So a food and beverage attendant, a competency standard might be that they need to be able to make coffee, they need to be able to serve food, they need to be able to process a credit card. Okay, that is a competency standard. That is what the minimum requirements of what they need to be able to perform, to be able to perform that task. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Look, this course is what we call a competency-based course, because Alyssa and I don't mark you with A pluses and C minuses and B plus. We say, yay, that's cool, or no, that's not exactly what we're looking for. So competency, are you able or are you not able? Is it satisfactory or is it not satisfactory? And that's really what is meant by competency. For this particular question, you could give or take the word. It doesn't really have to be there. What the question is sort of saying is, if you're not reaching your standards that are required for you in your role professionally, what can you do to improve yourself?
Yeah, and I guess using an example, if you were a food and beverage attendant, just to make it to contextualize it a little bit, if you were if you were a food and beverage attendant and you were having difficulty making coffees, what could you do to improve your skills or knowledge in that particular competency? You know.
Superb. And what are you looking for as answers? Should we give a couple of examples? I think our students could probably work it out.
Yeah, I mean,
There's been a few questions like this anyway, so it's a variation on the theme. Yeah, really, what can you do to improve skills and knowledge?
That's it,
You
yeah.
realise that you needed to improve some skill or knowledge in a particular area.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, you know, there are lots of different opportunities that you can use, or there are lots of different strategies that you could use to improve your skills or your knowledge. And, you know, we've talked about a couple of them tonight as well. So, you know, incorporate some of those strategies and some of those into this answer. I mean, I think without, I can't say anything without giving the answer away. So.
Yeah, but it's pretty straightforward. So it's nothing too tricky here. I mean, you know, you'll be right with that one.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the next one because it sort of rolls on from this one.
Definitely.
So using your current job description, what are the competency standards required of you, and how do you measure yourself against these standards?
Yeah.
What are we going to say to them? There's obviously a bunch of students that might say, well, look, I don't have a job description at the moment.
Yep.
We're happy for you to use any example.
Yep.
So you might just say using the example, and I've got an example here that I'd like to use anyway for the purpose of this discussion for a receptionist.
Mm-hmm.
So have a look. If you don't have a job at the moment, our suggestion is to go online, go to Seek or go to one of those websites, find a job description, because every job description will generally state what the main responsibilities are of the role. Now, the main responsibilities of the role is generally what we're referring to when we say, you know, your competency standards required of you. So I'm going to read out, and the question here says, how do you measure yourself against these standards? So the question is basically saying, you know, you're required to perform a job. How are you going to measure yourself or make sure that you're up to those levels that you need to be up to? And that's really what the question is saying. I'm actually looking at a job description right now for a receptionist, and the main responsibilities for a receptionist include answering calls, organising meetings, ordering stationery, distribution of mail, and ad hoc office duties as required. So they are the main responsibilities of a receptionist. Now, if I was a receptionist, how would I measure the question here is saying, how am I going to measure myself against that standard? So answering calls. So like what we've talked about before with KPIs or key performance indicators or any of these sort of things, the way to do it is to stick a numeric value against it, almost is the only way to do it. So with answering calls, a way that I could measure myself might be that, you know, I need to achieve 95% of you know, inbound call answers. And the way I could measure that is I could get a report or print up a report on inbound calls answered versus missed, and just check the report. Have I answered 95% of, you know, my calls for that day? That type of thing. Ordering stationery. Well, how do I measure myself against my main responsibility, which is to order stationery? I might go and have a little sneaky peek in the stationery cupboard and set maybe minimum levels for all items, and when items reduce themselves under minimum levels, I can then reorder again. It's a way that I can make sure that I'm keeping the stationery cupboard filled and I'm doing my bit there. So that's sort of what we're asking. Am I going down the right way with this one, do you think, Alyssa?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, I guess the key term is their competency standards and really how you measure yourself. So it does need to be something, as Adam mentioned, something quite specific, something quite tangible. I mean, like you were like looking at reports, having 95% type of, you know, return call rate, or yeah, just definitely be careful of and make sure you kind of answer both elements of that question. So what are competency standards, and how do you measure yourself against them? So yeah, I think you've gone into some significant detail, and I think the receptionist example is quite a good one as well. Yeah.
So really, what we're asking, if you don't have a job, if you do, you know, list some of the main responsibilities of a particular job and how one would measure themselves against those standards. That's fine. That's more than fine.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Oh, next question. Oh, I really like the next question.
I know you do. We need to dedicate a whole hour to you and 360-degree feedback.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. That'd be fantastic. Does everybody that's here live right now, are you all happy to hang around an extra hour tonight? We're going to just run this one. We're going to run this one all night tonight on 360-degree feedback.
It's 24-hour live.
Don't all leave at once. I'm just kidding. Okay. So let's talk 24
hours.
Didn't you put this as a groundbreaking discussion? A 24-hour groundbreaking discussion. I don't know that I can be groundbreaking for 24 hours.
I don't think I could. Physically that's no.
Not sure if it's possible. I just want to talk a little bit about the guys about what 360 feedback is. The material does talk about it. It sort of ebbs and flows a bit. It talks about it. I'm reading it from the perspective of sort of knowing what it is, so it's a bit different. Just if you're not really 100% sure, the way I look at 360 feedback is really a system or a process where employees receive confidential and anonymous feedback from people that work around them. The big key here is that this is anonymous feedback. This is what people are not aware of, or I'm not sure that they're aware of. Why we call it 360-degree feedback is that what is 360 degrees? Really, 360 degrees is a full circle. It's all of the angles in a full circle, in a sphere. And why we call it 360 feedback is because what we're trying to do is we typically include managers, we include peers, we include direct reports, we include a mixture of, usually you want to get probably about 10 people depending on the size of the business. And that's why we call it 360 because you're getting feedback from all angles. Does that sort of make sense? The key here is that it's anonymous. What that means is that if I give you a feedback form where I say, you know, how does Alyssa, what is it like to work with Alyssa? Does she interact really well? Have you got any concerns about working with Alyssa? That your name isn't at the top of that sheet. And it totally changes the dynamic of the feedback. If I say to you, Alyssa, I want you to provide feedback for me, just put your name on top of the form and then send me a copy of what you think about me. Are you likely to be as open and honest as you could about me? If you knew that the feedback was completely anonymous, you could put down feedback for me and you knew that your name wasn't associated, would not affect our relationship going forward, changes the dynamic, and that's exactly what 360 feedback is. It's about getting feedback from all people, from all angles, and having it anonymous. And I'm not sure, I might just continue this rave through on to the next question. What is the actual question that we're dealing with here anyway?
So,
sorry, yeah, go for it.
So I guess the question itself is, prior to completing your online 360 survey, when was the last time you formally asked for feedback from the people around you and how did you do? I guess, obviously, just try and forget about the prior to completing your online 360-degree survey and just really basically answer, when was the last time you formally asked for feedback from the people around you and how did you do? Okay?
Yeah, it's a really easy question, isn't it? It's actually pretty straightforward, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's a lot of students that have gotten really confused about it because they're like, what's the 360-degree survey? So just forget about that and then just really just focus in on that second half of that question. All right? And again, it is just a personal question. I think we kind of get a little bit specific in question 5, and it really focuses in on, you know, a great description, Adam, of the 360-degree feedback process. So what benefit do you think completing a 360-degree feedback survey is for you and for your business as well?
Yeah, and we want to see examples of both for you and the business, not you and the business as one. We want to clearly see what the benefits are for the business and then put a couple of little spaces in between your answer there, and then we want to see what the benefits are for you as an individual.
Yep, absolutely.
We clearly want you to see a distinction between the two, and if we don't see that distinction, then we'll ask for more information. You can't really get it wrong if you just provide, you know, what would be a logical sort of answer here. But yeah, just make sure that you're giving us at least an benefit for business and did I just say and twice? And benefit, I might have said it even 3 times, for the individual as well. Just to continue on a little bit from what I was talking about before, and this is certainly going to be important information in putting down what your benefits are. It's really important to note that the 360-degree feedback is not a matter of assessing somebody's technical performance. It is not a performance appraisal. Typically, a performance appraisal, what that is more of a formal performance meeting where we sit down, and I might sit down with my team leader or manager and have a chat about, what my targets have been, how I've been going in general. It does tend to cover a lot of aspects because it becomes quite personal, but a 360 feedback is not a matter of measuring somebody against their KPIs. It is not saying, does this person get 55 orders out every day? Does this person answer 95% of their phone calls? It is not about that at all. 360-degree survey actually aims to measure people's behaviorisms, the way they interact with other people. It actually aims to address a lot of the soft skills, leadership, characteristics, what they're like as a team player. Do they interact well? Do they not interact well? It's not, how do you feel about them turning up late or not turning up on time or those sorts of things. It is really about a lot of the soft sides, the things that aren't what we call visible, aren't able to be seen in business. So it's not about the technical aspects of the job. Although if something that they do on a technical aspect bothers you and it makes you feel uncomfortable, then you would put that in there. So does that sort of make a little bit of sense?
Yeah.
Do you understand where I'm sort of coming from with that?
Yeah.
It's not job-specific skills. It's more about how they interact. However, if you feel awkward around that person because of something they're doing, as a job-specific skill, it can be talked about. But it's not really a matter of grilling somebody for their skill set, but more just talking about how you interact with them and how do they motivate you, do they inspire you, are you happy working with this particular person, how would you feel that might improve your relationship with that particular person, what could make your life easier working with this person. They're the sorts of things you'll generally get put into a 360 feedback, because you get a chance to get a bit of what we call visibility in areas that you wouldn't otherwise see just printing out a report, a sales report or something.
Yeah.
So think about that when you think about the benefits to yourself and to the business. That's all I'll say there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I think they get to do all performance management and performance appraisals in one of the other units, I think. Isn't that right?
Manage people performance, subject manage people. Yeah. And so we will go into communication strategies. We will go into so much more detail in that field. I cannot wait for this subject. I'm telling you right now. Maybe we just pass every student on these subjects so we can get them into that subject.
Don't say that out loud, Adam.
Kidding. Oh, I love that subject so much. I love it. Anyways, I was actually having a conversation about that with a student earlier today. She was telling me how much she loved managed business document design. I said, really? So I just got to show that everybody's quite different. Some people are going to love those, what I call the people skilled sort of subjects, the ones that have a real human element to them. So this subject we're talking about is one of those subjects, and managed people performance is a subject like that. Undertake project work or project planning or business documents is not a very humanized subject. This is how you create a template. There's a right answer and a wrong answer. There's logic there. There's no human component to it. But look, I love those subjects that involve those sorts of things. We should probably wrap. It's a couple of minutes after 7. Let's probably wrap it up. The last question here: how could you use the feedback in your 360 survey to improve your own work practices? Well, it's really a non-question as far as I'm concerned, because really the idea is that you're using that feedback to improve. The question says it itself. How could you use the feedback to improve your own work practices? Or you would use the feedback to improve your own work practices. So it's a bit of a dumb question, but look, I'm happy. Yeah, what do you think, Alyssa?
Yeah, look, I think those two connected. So, what benefit do you think completing a 360-degree feedback is for you? So, what are the benefits? And I guess if you can just give us a couple of examples of how it might help you improve your work practices. I guess just some more practical kind of strategies that you could use in the workplace, I guess. But as Adam said, it's just the questions are quite similar. They feed into each other quite a bit. So yeah, just pop a couple of strategies down that are practical for the work environment, and I think you'll be all good with that one.
Look, I've had students that said by identifying the training gap or by identifying a skills gap, things like that. That's fine. Don't mind doing that. If you want to identify some of the things like identifying where I haven't been. Identifying things like listening or setting goals or, building my character or working better, more effectively in a team environment, well, you give us examples, we'll love you forever and a day. So you can give us the what's, not just the how's. But basically, if you cover it over question 5 and 6, give us an understanding of why you would use it and what you're kind of expecting to do with it. If you sort of explain that somewhere over question 5 and 6, I'm sure we'll be pretty happy.
Yes, that sounds good.
Yeah. All right. That's it? Is there any more questions here? No.
Yeah. Is there anybody got any general questions that they might like to ask us, or is there any additional feedback that you'd like to provide us with, or some general stuff? Because yeah, we've gone through all those learning activity questions.
Yeah, more than happy if you want to ask anything at this point. So if you have any questions about any of this, about this particular subject, any subject, the workload, anything that you want to throw out there, you're welcome to do so. The floor is now yours. If you'd like to speak, feel free to just chuck something in the chat box. We'll unmute your microphone.
I think Chris has mentioned that he's good.
Okay. We might actually just end the recording now, Alyssa, and then if anybody wants to speak, they can do so too.
All right, no problems. I'm stopping.